Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane, Prabhu Kripahi Kevalam, Kripahi Kevalam, Kripahi Kevalam Sharane, Prabhu Kripahi Kevalam, Kripahi Kevalam, Kripahi Kevalam Sharane, Jai Jai Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane, Sharanagatoham, Sharanagatoham, Sharanagatoham Sharane, Sharanagatoham, Sharanagatoham, Sharanagatoham Sharane, Jai Jai Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane. Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Namo, Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Shri Gurave, Namo Namo, Jai Jai Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane, Ram Krishna Jaya Jaya Ram Krishna, 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 Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam, Ram Krishna Sharanam Sharane.
Om ya pritir vivekanam vishayeshu anupayini tvam anusmarata same hridayan mapasarpatu tvameva mata cha pita tvameva bandhus cha sakha tvameva vidya dravinam Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. That intense love which the ignorant bear towards the objects of the world, may I have that same intensity of love for thee. For thou art my mother, thou my father, thou my only friend and companion. Thou art my wealth and my only knowledge. Thou art my all in all, O Lord of Lords. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So good morning. This morning the topic is the yoga of devotion. the last 4 or 5 talks, other than the question and answer session last week. Otherwise, the last 4 or 5 talks have been on the 4 yogas. And so this is the concluding lecture on the 4 yogas. I gave one on finding our way through the forest of the 4 yogas, discussing the dynamics among the yogas, how they relate to each other, what each one is. And then the 3 of the yogas I've already dealt with in individual talks, and now the yoga of devotion. So let me begin by saying a word or two about the characteristics of Bhakti Yoga, what distinguishes it from the other yogas. Whenever we define anything, there are 2 ways that we define something. One way is to say what it is, and the other is to say what it is not. And so let me say a few words about what distinguishes Bhakti Yoga from the other yogas. As I've said in the other talks on the other yogas, that each yoga addresses certain questions in its own particular way. For instance, what is bondage? What is liberation? What is the means of liberation? Etc. And so Bhakti Yoga has its own perspective on these questions. For instance, the question, what is bondage in Bhakti Yoga? And let me first say about bondage, where does the question of bondage come to begin with? Well, if there were no bondage, there would be no spiritual path. If we weren't experiencing some sort of bondage, some sort of limitation, some sort of problem in life, then there would be no need for spiritual life. We come to spiritual life because we feel some limitation. And limitation in this context is referred to as bondage. Something which is limiting us. And that is bondage. And so without that, again, we wouldn't seek a spiritual remedy for the problems of life. As Swami Atmarupanada used to say, when everything is going well and you're happy and you're having a good time, you don't stop and think, why am I having such a good time? Why am I so happy? No, you just enjoy yourself. It's when you feel limitations, when you feel the restrictions in life, when you feel the problems in life, then you become philosophical and think, why? Why am I experiencing this limitation? Why am I experiencing problems? And it doesn't seem like it now, but thankfully, we all experience problems in life. If it weren't for that, then we would be content with a very small, little, limited existence which we have. That would be sufficient for us if there weren't problems. It's because in this realm there are problems that we seek something higher. That's the motivating force for seeking something higher. And as I've explained in the Gita class, for those of you who come to the Gita class, that was the whole value in the first chapter, that Arjuna began to experience his bondage. He began to experience the problems of life. He was faced with a tremendous dilemma, and it was that which made him seek refuge in Sri Krishna. Without that, you just go forward in life and do what you have to do. And so it's the experiencing of limitation that brings us to spiritual life. So in Bhakti Yoga, each of the yogas faces the problem of bondage, the problem of limitation. In Bhakti Yoga, bondage is forgetting our eternal relationship with the divine. Forgetting our eternal relationship with the divine. So it's a problem of forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is the source of all of our other problems. Now, one of the things to understand in spiritual life in general is that according to any spiritual path, in one way or another, it has the idea that there's only one final solution to the problems of life, and that is a spiritual solution. And that's true with Bhakti Yoga as with the other yogas. It's true of Hinduism as of Buddhism, as it is with Christianity, Islam, etc. The idea that there's only one solution to the problems of life. We face a problem in life. Our problems seem to be specific, particular problems. I've got to pay a bill, so I need to make money to pay the bill. So that's the solution to the problem. I have a dispute with my neighbor. So I go to the lawyer and bring a case against my lawyer. That's the solution to that problem. Someone has criticized me, and so I confront them, and that's my way of trying to solve that problem. I need more money, and so I seek a raise from my boss. That's my solution to that problem. The problem is there's no end to that. There's no end to that. You bring a lawsuit against your neighbor, and then you find that the neighbor countersues you. And then finally you get through that problem, and then the neighbor on the other side of you begins to cause problems. And then you solve that problem, and then you find the neighborhood association is causing you problems. And then you try to solve that, and you find you've got problems at work. You solve the problem at work, and then another problem at work arises. You solve that, and then you have a family problem. And you solve that, and then again, the neighbor again is causing trouble. And so there's no end to that. That's the nature of life. And so Bhakti Yoga says, as all spiritual paths say, that there is one solution to all of the problems in life, and that's a spiritual solution. But Bhakti Yoga's approach to it is particular to Bhakti Yoga. They're not contradictory. The different paths are not contradictory. They're complementary. But it's important to understand each particular path's approach. And so Bhakti Yoga says that all of our problems, without exception, family problems, neighbor problems, social problems, work problems, personal problems, mental problems, physical problems, all problems, they have their source in forgetfulness of the divine. And so if we could remember the divine, if we could remember God, then we could begin the ultimate solution of all problems. That we are in this situation where we are now, which is our Kurukshetra. It is a battlefield. It is a field in which life presents us with constant problems. The solution to it is, according to Bhakti Yoga, the remembrance of God. And liberation comes with the realization of God. So our bondage comes from forgetfulness, and liberation from all bondage comes from the realization of God. Then nothing can touch us. Nothing whatsoever can touch us, as we can see from the lives of great saints. Even those who continued after their realization of God to live in a human body, continue to live and act in the world, you find that though outwardly, to our eyes, it looks like they're confronting the ordinary problems that everyone else confronts, inwardly they're completely free. Inwardly they're completely free. You see that so clearly in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. In the lives of other saints and sages and realized souls and incarnations as well, avatars as well. But in Sri Ramakrishna, because his life record is so recent and so complete, that we can see that one moment he's like a child asking people, well, why did I break my arm? Why did this happen? Am I going to be all right again? And the next moment he's absorbed in divine bliss. And so there was a part of Ramakrishna's mind that was never affected by anything. That we see when Swami Turiyananda, before he became Swami Turiyananda, Hari came to Sri Ramakrishna. And he had been coming to Sri Ramakrishna, but one day Sri Ramakrishna asked Hari, his young, at that time a young disciple, said, I have this cancer of the throat and I'm suffering so much. And then Hari said, but sir, I see that your mind is always immersed in bliss. And then Sri Ramakrishna laughed and said, rascal, you found me out. That a part of Sri Ramakrishna's mind was completely free from all problems. The problems that arose in his life that we seem to see after his realization, those were like plague. They were like a plague. If you read the life of Ramana Maharshi, a great sage, an illumined soul, he was not of the devotional type, he was the jnani type, but the same thing as far as his living in the midst of the world. You could see him living, walking, talking to people, going and cutting vegetables, and people bringing him their problems and everything, but he was untouched by any of it. From an ordinary standpoint, it looked like he was in the midst of the world. From his standpoint, he was completely free. It was a beautiful incident. Again, this is not, he was not a saint of the devotional type, but he was a saint. So, one day, Ramana Maharshi scolded a woman for something in the ashram. And so all day the woman went on stewing about Ramana Maharshi having scolded her. And in the evening, the woman came to him very upset and said, "Sir, why was it that you scolded me? I didn't do anything wrong. But you scolded me." And so Ramana Maharshi said, "Why do you ask me about what you see in your own dream?" Meaning he had nothing to do with it. He was beyond all of that. She saw it as a great problem. For him, there was no problem at all. So in Sri Ramakrishna's case, it's the same with the devotional saints as well. So again, that's the idea in Bhakti Yoga, that the problem is forgetfulness of God, the solution is the realization of God. So there are a number of different definitions of what Bhakti is, but there are certain characteristics which distinguish, certain other characteristics which distinguish Bhakti Yoga. The prayer, which I said at the beginning, the first part of the prayer, there are actually two Sanskrit verses from different sources that I said at the beginning. One of them you know very well, many of you. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva, thou art my mother, thou art my father, thou my only friend and companion, etc. The first part was said by Prahlad, the great saint of the Puranas, the devotee of Sri Krishna, who in the Vishnu Purana, he says, "Ya priti ravivekanam vishayeshu anapaini." Swami Vivekananda said that this is the best definition of bhakti. It says that that intense love which the ignorant bear towards the objects of this world, may I have that same intensity of love for thee. For thou art my father, and then the rest is again another prayer, thou art my father, thou art my mother, etc. But that intense love which the ignorant bear towards the objects of this love, of this world, may I have that same intensity of love for thee. So Bhakti Yoga is the path of devotion, it's the path of love. And it's the path where we direct the love which we have towards God. Now that, of course, takes time. That's a lifetime's effort to redirect the direction of our love towards God. And so it's like all paths, it is a path. A path means I start here and I want to go there, but I start from here, taking little steps along the way. So it's not that I start here and hear about bhakti and, okay, direct my love towards God, okay, now I'm here. No, we go step by step. But it's a path in which we use the love that we have. And we go on increasing that love until it becomes intense, until the whole flood of our love is pouring towards God. So it's a path in which we redirect our devotion, redirect our love. And so one of the characteristics of Bhakti Yoga also is that it is God-centric. None of the other paths need to be God-centric. They're all spirit-centric, but Jnana Yoga is directed towards the impersonal self, the impersonal reality, that which I am, trying to know who am I. You don't even have to have the idea of God. In the path of Jnana Yoga, God is talked about merely to explain the cosmic picture, but as far as the path goes, you never have to refer to God. You're just seeking to know who I am in my deepest reality, because the idea is that that is the secret of existence, knowing who I am. In Karma Yoga, you can follow it with a devotional attitude, but you don't have to. You can follow karma yoga just with the intent of using work to become free. In Raja Yoga, you can follow it with a devotional intent, but you don't have to. You can follow it just as a technique to perfect the mind until the mind is capable of seeing reality. But Bhakti Yoga is the one path that begins with faith in God. So either one begins with faith in God or one develops faith in God. Some people are born with a natural faith in God. I've known people who say that from childhood they never questioned whether God existed or not. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that that's the fruit of many lifetimes of spiritual practice, that if faith in God is natural to you. And for those who don't have faith or don't have much faith, then there are ways of cultivating faith. Or you can take a different yoga. You can follow one of the yogas that doesn't require faith in God, doesn't require even the mention of God. But in Bhakti Yoga, it's the path of love, and love for what? Love for God. Not love for anything else, but love for God. So that's the distinguishing characteristic of Bhakti. It begins, proceeds, and ends with the idea of love for God. You begin with the whatever love you have, and you go on purifying that love until you find that love becomes like a river, then it becomes like a flood, all-consuming. Because each of us have that capacity within us. Again, if we want to follow Bhakti Yoga, we begin it with the faith, with the conviction that I may only have a little bit of love now, but love is infinite. And one day that love will become a huge flood, which will consume my very being. That love which takes me to God, love which takes me to the realization of God. So that's, in very brief, that's those are some of the distinguishing characteristics of Bhakti. Now, on every path, as I've said on other occasions, in every path, there are certain questions that a person asks. Like on the path of knowledge, the questions are asked such as, who am I? What is reality? What is truth? What is consciousness? What is existence itself? These are the sorts of questions that one asks on the path of jnana. On the path of bhakti, one asks questions such as, who and what is God? If it's a God-centric path, which it is, then the question, who and what is God, becomes extremely important. We begin with whatever idea we have. All ideas are accepted. All ideas are okay. All ideas are good. But gradually we begin to refine our ideas of God. Our idea of God begins to expand. It begins to become more and more real. Most of us start with sort of a conceptual understanding of God. Just God is, as they say sometimes, G-O-D. It's a word, it's a concept. But gradually that has to become more and more become a reality to us. And so the question, who and what is God, is a living question on the path of devotion, where we, although as soon as we can on the path of devotion, it shouldn't be who and what is God, but who and what are you? Who and what are you? It's a path of approaching God, and so our questions become questions to God. Not who and what is God, so let me read some books and find out, and okay, God's like this, God's like that, okay. No, we can do that. We can do that. But as soon as possible, the question becomes, who are you? Sri Ramakrishna said, for those who don't have faith in God, then begin by asking, O Lord, if you exist, O Divine Mother, O Divine Father, O Divine Friend, if you exist, let me know that you exist, and let me know who you are. That's a very strange thing. You start out without faith in God, and you're going to ask God to let you know whether God exists or not, whether he or she exists or not. That's a very strange way to approach it, it seems. But no, the psychology behind it is profound. That if you begin with the question, who are you? I don't know whether you exist or not, but reveal to me whether you exist or not. then within a short time you begin to feel that there's someone who is on the other end of the question. There's someone on the other end of the question. That's why among the Christian mystics who their main practice was prayer. They had other practices as well, but the main practice of the Christian mystics was prayer. And so the great Christian mystics who spoke of prayer said, the way to learn how to pray is to begin praying. That seems like a case of circular reasoning. You want to learn how to pray, so start praying. But no, there's a profound psychology behind it. If you begin to pray, then you begin to find that you begin to feel that there's someone on the other end of your prayer. There's someone who hears your prayer. And so with the question, do you exist? If you exist, let me know who you are. Let me know that you exist and let me know who you are. That question itself begins to bring faith in the result of the question. And so logically it may be circular reasoning, but psychologically it's not. Oftentimes we find in life in general, in all aspects of life and in spiritual life, that there is logic, that is rational logic of the reason, but then there are other types of, besides intellectual reasoning, there's other type of logic. There's psychological logic. Something may be a psychological truth. It may be contradictory in purely rational terms, but psychologically it's very true. There are experiential truths. There may be, in terms of strict reason, there may be a contradiction, but in experience it's true. And you see that even in science, where light is both a particle and a wave. According to some experiments, light acts as a particle, and some experiments, light behaves as a wave. A particle and a wave are quite distinct from each other. And yet, you find that light is both. Logically, it's a contradiction. But experientially, we see that it's true. And so in many areas of our life, we find this. And so in this asking God, who are you? Who are you? And how do I find you? Reveal yourself to me if you exist. There's a profound psychological logic behind it. So who and what is God? And then the question also for the Bhakta is, who am I? Now the Bhakta asks it in a different sense from the way that a Jnani asks it. And again, of course, the paths can be harmonized and you can follow both. But right now I'm talking about Bhakti in itself as a separate path. So the Jnani asks, who am I? With the idea that I am the reality itself. I am one with the infinite reality. I am one with the impersonal Brahman. And if I know who I am, then I know the secret of existence. And there's nothing else I need to know except for who am I. The Bhakta asks, who am I? In the context of who and what is God. Who am I for the Bhakta is connected to who is God. Who am I is connected to the question, what is my relationship to God? Who am I in relationship to God? That's the question of the Bhakta. Who am I in relationship to God? Swami Vivekananda used to say that religion is the eternal relationship between the eternal God and the eternal soul. That's what religion itself is. And Sri Ramakrishna used to tell his devotees, his inner circle of devotees, it wasn't something he told to everyone, but those who were of his inner circle of devotees, he said that all that they need to know is who am I and what is their relationship to me? Who am I and what is their relationship to me? As you see in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Kathamrita, as the original is called, he would ask him about what he thought of, what do you think of this? That wasn't an egotistical question. It wasn't because Sri Ramakrishna wanted to hear him praise him and say, oh, you are the greatest and you are so wonderful, or this, and Sri Ramakrishna would feel happy, oh, I've been praised and so I'm so happy. No, it was because Sri Ramakrishna knew that for his inner circle of disciples, the question was, what is this? That is, who is Sri Ramakrishna, as Sri Ramakrishna referred to himself. And what is your relationship to this? That was the question. So that is a devotional question. Who and what is God? Who am I and what is my relationship to God? Now it's interesting that Sri Ramanuja, the great philosopher of devotion, he of the 13th century, he said that on the path of devotion, one first practices karma yoga to purify the mind, and then one practices jnana yoga. On the path of devotion, one next practices jnana yoga in order to know who am I. And for him, that question meant that to find that I am a center of consciousness. I'm a conscious being. I'm a jiva. I too am spirit, but I'm small spirit, and God is the infinite spirit. So once I know who I am, that is, that I am a part of, I am a spirit, a part of God, then I can find my true relationship to God, who's the infinite spirit. I am a spark and God is a fire. I am a drop and God is the ocean. And so if I know myself to be a spark of fire, then it's easier for me to find the infinite fire. If I know myself to be a drop of water, then it's easier for me to go in search of the ocean. If I think that I'm a bag of flesh and bones, a bag of meat and bones, with a little flicker of consciousness which is produced by the brain, which is just itself a sack of flesh, then how do I relate myself to God? How do I relate myself to God? If I'm just a bag of meat and bones with a little flicker of consciousness which is produced by this bag of flesh and bones, then what is my relationship to God? No, my relationship to God is based on the fact that God is consciousness itself, and I too am a center of consciousness. That behind this body, behind this mind, there's the light of consciousness which is illumining the body and mind, which is making the body and mind aware. And so if I can know myself as fundamentally consciousness, as a center of consciousness, then it's much easier to go in search of the infinite consciousness which is God. If I can know that within me there's a little bit of love, then I can begin to conceive of God as the infinite ocean of love. So as I know myself, my higher self, then I can more easily go in search of God. So who and what is God? Let me dwell on that for a few minutes, the question who and what is God. Because that, again, is fundamental to the spiritual quest. And because we inherit from society, from our respective cultures and from society and so forth, so many ideas of God, which on the spiritual path, some of them we have to get rid of because they are detrimental to the path, to the spiritual path. And so the idea that God is a judge, that's something that if we want to follow the path of devotion, we have to go beyond that idea of God as a judge. God is not a supreme policeman who's watching to find out if I'm doing something wrong. This idea that God is waiting to strike me down because I did something God didn't like, or I thought something that God didn't like. No, that idea we have to get rid of. God is not a cosmic judge. God is not standing in judgment waiting for me to make a mistake so that he can punish me. No, that's a very crude idea of God. Get rid of that completely. Whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whatever, get rid of that idea that God is a judge. That's very harmful to the idea of devotion. You find the great saints of Christianity and Islam, the Sufi saints, those who became great saints, they got rid of that idea. And that idea was never strong in Hinduism. It is present, but it's not strong in Hinduism. But that idea has to be gotten rid of from the mind. One of my teachers in training center, one of the Swamis, Indian Swami, he used to tell us, the brahmacharis in training center, he would say, you have to be careful because Sri Ramakrishna is always watching. He knows what you are doing and he knows what you are thinking. thought, my goodness, even here, Sri Ramakrishna is being presented as a cosmic policeman. No. Get rid of that idea. Get rid of, yes, Sri Ramakrishna knows everything that you think. Yes, he knows everything that you do. Yes, that's true. But Sri Ramakrishna is love incarnate, who loves you for your very being, not for what you do and what you don't do. Those things are understood. Those things are part of the human condition. That to just resign to the human condition. But my relationship to God is one of love. There was a period many years ago when I was in San Diego, this would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. Though I was there from the early 80s to the late 90s, but this period was in the late 80s, early 90s. Oftentimes in the car, I would listen to conservative, fundamentalist radio stations just to as I found the psychology interesting. And so learning about the psychology behind that worldview and so forth. At that period I found it interesting. Now I couldn't bear it, but at that time I could. And so I remember once there was a call-in there was a call-in program on this radio station, and I often enjoyed the call-in station because the man was along with being a minister, he also was a trained psychologist, and so it was interesting to hear his answers and the types of questions people brought to him, and sometimes very good answers, sometimes answers I didn't think were so good. That's natural. But one time I remember that a woman called in and asked this question and answer host that, sir, my father was a very good man. He believed in Christ all of his life. He tried to do the right thing. He tried to be a faithful disciple of Christ, and he always tried to do the right thing. But he made a mistake. And that is that he became a follower of Jim Jones. Some of you remember Jim Jones was the one who took that group of his followers down to Guyana, and there they all ended up drinking Kool-Aid and committing mass suicide. And so anyway, she said that he became a follower of Jim Jones in the early days when Jim Jones was a charismatic preacher and preaching basically mainstream, more or less mainstream Christianity. But because he became a follower and became very devoted to him, when Jim Jones began to become more and more extreme and more strange, he followed him to Guyana, and he ended up committing suicide. So I want to know what happened to my father. He was a good man. He believed in Christ. He loved Christ. But because he made a mistake in judgment and followed this man, and his life ended in suicide, what will happen to him? Doesn't his devotion to Christ and his goodness, doesn't that count for anything? And so I remember the host, he said, he began on a good note. He said, I can't pretend to know what God would decide. But then he went on to say, but I can assure you this, that whatever God decided was completely just. And I thought, that's not what anyone wants for themselves. We want justice for other people. He did something bad, you put him in jail. He did something bad, you should strike him down, and so forth. We want justice for other people. We want mercy for ourselves. All of us want mercy for ourselves. None of us want justice. We want someone who understands that, yes, I did something, you did something wrong, but I understand. I understand. And that's okay. Just come to me and I'll give you succor. Come to me and I will give you rest. That's what all of us seek for. All of us seek for a Sri Krishna who said, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all other ideas, all other dharmas, and come to me and I will give you refuge. Or the Christ who said that all ye who are heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. That idea, that's what we seek. And that's the God of Bhakti. The God of Bhakti is not a judge who's going to be infinitely just. We did something wrong and so we deserve to be struck down, so he's going to strike us down. No, that's what we want for other people. Until we ourselves experience mercy, and then we don't want it even for other people. We want not that people will do bad things and get away with it. No, we don't. No one wants that. But we do want that people find their way. People do terrible things sometimes, but rather than wishing that they be destroyed and hurt and tortured and put into infinite pain, we come to a point where we want everyone to be uplifted, everyone to find their way to God, everyone to find their way to love, everyone to find their way to a higher existence. What good does it do me to see someone else in pain? What good does it do me to see someone else tortured? What good does it do me to see someone else punished severely for for what has happened? Yes, karma itself will punish. That we don't have to worry about. But what I should want for everyone is that people see the right path, that people see the way up, that if there's a chance for redemption, then let them be redeemed, let them be uplifted. So God is not a judge. God is love itself. God is compassion itself. God is one who wants your own welfare. God doesn't want to see you suffer because you made a mistake. No, God wants you to see your mistake and see beyond your mistake your way to redemption, to go beyond it to redemption. And so that's the God that we worship, a God who is love itself. The idea of God is a very big idea, and there are many aspects to God. And that's understood in the Hindu philosophy of the divine, that there are many aspects of God. There's God as the creator. There's God as the karma phaladata, the one who makes the law of karma work, who brings the fruits of karma, good and bad, to you. It's the unity of God which brings the good and bad fruits to you. But those are not the aspects of God which we worship. What we worship as God is the heart of God. Because the heart of God is not a judgmental heart. It's the heart of a mother. That at the center of the universe there is a heart, an all-conscious, all-knowing heart, a heart which is the heart of a mother. Whether we think of God as our mother, as our father, as our friend, as our companion, whether we think of God in terms of male or female, it doesn't matter. But the heart of God is the heart of a mother. The heart of a mother who loves her child no matter what the child does, who is always ready to bring the child back, who is always ready, as the Holy Mother said, to wash the mud off of the child. So that's the God that we want, that's the God that we worship. That's the aspect of God that is the God that we worship. And so who and what is God? God is infinite love. God is infinite wisdom. God is infinite existence. But an infinite existence not separated from love. An infinite wisdom not separated from love. An infinite awareness which is aware of everything and yet sees everything in terms of love. Sees everything in terms of unity. So that's the God that we worship. And who am I? That's a question each one in the path of devotion answers for themselves, because there are as many answers as there are people. There's many answers as there are people. There are certain categories of answers that are helpful in helping us to find my answer, who I am, but specifically there are as many answers as there are people. Is God my friend? Is God my master and I'm the servant? Is God my lover? Is God my child? Even the Holy Mother, she had different relationships with her devotees. There were some who looked on Holy Mother as a little child, themselves as the mother of Holy Mother. So you see Holy Mother, with some she was the mother, with others she was a little girl. There was such a beautiful quality of a little girl to the Holy Mother that it's very easy to think of her as one's child. So what is my relationship to God? There are many, many different answers, but all of them have the relationship of love. Let me mention, because it's always mentioned in texts on Bhakti, the 5 the Panchabhavas, the 5 attitudes of a devotee. It's important to know that these 5 attitudes were the 5 attitudes that were established with Sri Krishna. And so they're not all comprehensive, because within these 5 bhavas, there's no God as father, there's no God as mother. And yet those are 2 of the predominant attitudes we have in religious life. So never think that the 5 bhavas are all of the attitudes that they are. No, those are the 5 attitudes that people had established, and later saints established with Sri Krishna. Saints and ordinary people. That is the Shanta Bhava, the peaceful attitude, the attitude where God is like the ocean and I'm the wave. God is the infinite, all-wise reality, and I'm a part of that. So it's called a peaceful bhava because there's not the intensity of love in it. It's a path in which one seeks a peaceful relationship between the part and the whole. God is the whole and I'm the part. And then there's the dasya attitude, the attitude of the master and servant. Now oftentimes, and even Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji will say that the Madhura Bhava, that is where God is the beloved, and the relationship between 2 lovers, that's the highest. We always have to understand that within context. It's the highest relationship because of the intensity of love. But that doesn't mean that a person following Madhura Bhava is higher than someone following Dasya Bhava, the attitude of servant to master. What greater devotee was there ever than Hanuman? What greater devotee was there than Hanuman? And his attitude was one of a servant to the master. And yet, where was there more wisdom than Hanuman had? Where was there more devotion than Hanuman had? So, we shouldn't get into this, well, they say that Madhura Bhava is the highest, so I'm going to go straight to the highest. Why would I want anything less? No. Find that which is right to you. There's some people who have, when they get closer to God, they have a natural desire to be a servant, a natural desire to be a servant. Look at someone like St. Francis of Assisi, outside of the Hindu tradition. St. Francis of Assisi, who had a master-servant relationship. Where will you find a greater saint than that? Look at Hanuman and many of the other great saints of Hinduism, of Islam, of Christianity. And so the highest relationship is the one which is highest for you, which is most suited for you. So dasya is the attitude of a master to servant, or a servant to the master. The desire to pour one's heart out in service. It's not a slavish attitude. It's not the attitude of a slave, of a servant who gets beaten by the master. It's an attitude of a loving service, that I want to pour out my heart into service to God. And then there's the attitude of the Sakha, the friend of God, the one who thinks that God is my dearest friend, a relationship of equals, a relationship of equals. God is my friend, my companion, one in whom I can confide all of my thoughts, everything I can confide in God. And so the attitude of the friend of God, and that can be whether you look on God as male or female, as the Divine Mother, or the Divine Father, or the Divine Friend. And then the Vatsalya Bhava, the attitude of looking on God as my own child. So Dasya, God is above and I'm the servant and I worship the Divine Master. Sakha Bhava is a relationship of equals, that God and I are friends. And Vatsalya is a relationship of the devotee is superior and God is the child whom I care for. So I'm the caregiver of God. That also is a beautiful relationship. And that you see sometimes in some of the saints outside of Hinduism as well. For instance, Saint Teresa of Avila. The beautiful experiences sometimes she had of Christ as a child, visions of Christ as a child. One day she was going, I think she was marching in procession with, I think it was to Salamanca in Spain. I believe that's where it was. They were going to establish a new foundation. And someone was carrying, as they do in Spain, much like in India, carrying a statue of the Christ child in the procession. And so St. Teresa was going along with the others, and suddenly she saw the statue come to life, and the Christ child come down from the from the pole that was held on, the living Christ, and began to dance with her. And so that relationship of the mother or father to a child. But whether one is in a male or a female body, one can either way have the attitude that I'm the mother of God, the mother of Ramakrishna, the mother of Holy Mother, the mother of Christ, etc. And then the Madhura Bhava, of course, the attitude of between two lovers. God is my beloved. There it said that Madhura Bhava contains all of the other bhavas. The attitude of service, the attitude of equals, the attitude of caring like a mother for the beloved, and the attitude of the beloved to beloved, where one loses oneself in love for God. Of course, through all of the attitudes, one can lose oneself through love of God. And then, of course, outside of those pancha bhavas, there's the attitude of God as Father, God as Mother. And so all of them are good. Beyond that, beyond these relationships to God, is the idea of how I think of my own being in relationship to the being of God. And so there are beautiful examples of that also, where whatever your bhava, whatever the attitude you have towards God, and that is as a relationship, the attitude that I'm a point of consciousness and God is infinite consciousness. I'm a point of love and God is the infinite ocean of love. And I seek to merge my little love into the infinite ocean of love. I don't lose anything. Oh, I wish I had brought, I should have, now that I think of it, I should have looked it up. I don't remember it to quote it, but a beautiful poem by Rumi, the Sufi saint that all of you have heard of, the great Sufi saint Rumi. There's a beautiful poem that I'll paraphrase part of it. He says, "What have I ever lost by dying? I was a plant, I died and I became, or I was a mineral and I died and I became a plant. I was a plant and I died and I became animal. I was animal and I died and I became human. I was human and I died and I became the beloved. And that when the drop enters into the ocean, the drop dies as a drop, but it's reborn as the ocean itself." And so that idea that I'm a spark of light and God is the infinite light. I'm a spark of consciousness, God is the infinite consciousness. I'm a little flame of love, God is the infinite ocean of love. And so by merging my little flame of love into the infinite ocean of love, I become the ocean. I don't disappear. I become the infinite ocean of love. Yeah, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say that, quoting Ram Prasad, that the wave on the sea, the wave always belongs to the ocean, not the ocean. The ocean doesn't belong to the wave. So I can think of myself as a wave on the infinite ocean of God, and I'm a wave on the infinite ocean of God. But if I'm a wave on the infinite ocean of God, I am one with God, because the wave is what? The wave is nothing but water. It's just a particular manifestation of water. And as water, there's no distinction. As St. Teresa said of the highest state of union which she had experienced, spiritual union, she said that when you have in a room two windows, and light coming from one window and light coming from another window, but inside the room you can't say, oh, this light is from that window and this light is from that window. No, it's all just light. It's nothing but light. No division, no distinction. And so that if I'm a wave on the ocean of God, then there's really no distinction. The distinction is only there for the sake of play, only for the sake of play. So let me just say a few words about practices, because all of you know the practices of Bhakti Yoga are the most well known in all traditions of the world. Whether reading scriptures, meditating on scriptures, singing, dancing, japa, prayer, worship, making offerings and so forth. All of those are traditional devotional practices. And all of them are designed to turn the mind towards God, to turn the mind towards God. So remember in the practice of bhakti, if that is your path or if it's a part of your path. And remember always that what you're trying to do is to turn your mind towards God, not towards God as an object, but in a face-to-face encounter. That second half of the Rudra prayer that all of you are familiar with. They're actually from two different sources. The first part is from the Brihadaranyaka and the second part from the Shvetashvatara Upanishads. But Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya Aviravir Mayedi. And so the translation, and it goes on. The translation of that second part of the prayer is that reach us through and through ourself, O Lord, and evermore protect us by thy sweet compassionate face. Dakshinam Mukham, thy sweet compassionate face. Protect us with your sweet compassionate face. That is, when we pray to God, when we think about God, when we do japa, we're trying to look into the face of God. Not a face which is looking that way, or looking that way, but a face which is looking this way. Even if we picture a form of God within the heart, and the form of God is looking that way if seated in the heart, still, we're looking into the face of God, looking into the face of God. The Dakshinam Mukham, the auspicious, sweet, compassionate face of God. And so when I come to a temple and I bow down, I'm not thinking, oh, there's the altar, or there's the deity seated up there, so okay, let me make pranam to the deity. No, come into a temple and say, oh, you are seated there. Here I make pranam to you. I'm making pranam to you. It's a face-to-face encounter. So in the path of devotion, always try to convert everything into a face-to-face encounter. It's not thinking about God, it's directing your thoughts to God face-to-face. It's not meditating on God, it's meditating with God, face-to-face. It's not repeating japa as if there's somebody seated somewhere and you're saying their name, om, 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 om. No, it's calling them face-to-face, asking them with each repetition of the mantra, please reveal yourself to me. Remove the veil from your face. Reveal yourself to me. And so the path of devotion is that. So there, the traditional paths you know, but that's the purpose behind all of the practices. And then there is Vaidhi Bhakti and Para Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti and Para Bhakti, that is beginning Bhakti, controlled by vidhis. That's why it's called Vaidhi Bhakti. That is vidhis or injunctions. Practice so much, at certain times of the day do this, at other times of the day do that. Spend so much time reading scripture, spend so much time meditating, spend a little time doing worship. Do it in this way, do it in that way. Take a japa mala, a rosary, and say the mantra so many times and all of that. That's all said to give some training to the mind. Because if you don't have some rules for your practice, then you don't know what to do. So you have certain rules. Do it in this way, do it in that way, do it in this way. And if you do it in a way which has been done down the ages by many people, then you have the feeling that this has been tested by millions of people over thousands of years. And so I have faith that it worked for so many, it will work for me also. So it gives you faith in the practice. But then there's Para Bhakti, Supreme Bhakti. And even before, that's when the love is all-consuming, and then you go beyond all vidhis and nishedas, all injunctions and prohibitions. Then love itself is the only discipline that you need. Love itself shows you what to do. All you want to do is to merge yourself in God. But before that, that's a high state. That's like Sri Ramakrishna reached when he got to the point where he couldn't do puja anymore. It was impossible to do puja. Because he had gone beyond all bounds. And the devotion was so intense that it washed away all rules and regulations. But even long before that, while we're still on the path, and ordinary people, but we've gone away, we find that with time, there's less and less, the rules and regulations are less and less important. I just want to spend more time thinking about God. I want to spend more time directing my mind towards God. I don't need so many rules and regulations. I sit down, I've got a few minutes, then I revert to japa. I sit down, I've got a little time, then I start praying. and so forth. And then the rules and regulations are not so important. In the beginning, they're important just to give some shape, to give some direction to the current of your mind. Afterwards, they're not that important. Let me say a final word about prapatti, surrender. That Sri Ramanuja, again the great philosopher of devotion, he said that to follow the path of devotion, there are all of these rules, there are all of these regulations. There's this you have to do, that you have to do, this you have to do, this comes first, that comes next, that comes next. There's so many requirements on the path of devotion. But he said that not everyone can fulfill all of those requirements, because the path of devotion, in this elaboration of the path, is quite elaborated. It's quite demanding. So he said that there's another way, and that's the way of prapatti, which anyone can follow, and you don't need anything else but just this idea of surrendering to God. Just this idea of surrendering to God. I don't need anything else. If I do japa, if I do prayer, if I do worship, that's an expression of my prapatti, but not rule-based practice. That let me just try as often as I can to think that I'm surrendered to God. When I have to make a choice in life, when I have to make a decision, let me surrender it to God. Yes, I may not be so blessed that I surrender it to God and then God says, okay, do this, and I follow it. No. But I surrender it to God, and then when I have to act, I act, but with a sense of surrender. Let this be as you wish. Let this be as you want it. If it's not what you want, then let me know. But I have to decide, so I'm going to do this. This seems best, but that's according to my limited intelligence. You of infinite intelligence and infinite love and infinite concern, if this is not right, you please let me know. And so we do everything with a sense of resignation. I still have to make choices because I don't see God directing my path. I still have to make choices, but I do it with a sense of resignation. And when I do work, I surrender that to God. When I do a little meditation or prayer or worship, I surrender that to God. When I don't have time for anything else, I surrender that to God. When I have problems, I surrender those to God. When I have success, I surrender that to God. Surrender everything to God, good, bad, and indifferent. Now, many of us will think that, I would like to surrender all the bad things, but then when good things, why should I surrender that? No, it's for your good. It's for your good that you surrender everything, good and bad. It's not that God won't like you if you surrender only the bad and keep the good for yourself. No, it's not a question of God liking or disliking. It's that if you try to keep the good for yourself, then the good itself becomes a bondage to you. It becomes a limitation. It ends up causing you pain. And so it's for your good. Surrendering everything good and bad is for your good. It's for your own peace of mind. If you don't take the good things, you don't have to take the bad things. If you take only the good, you'll find that there's bad attached to the good. That because you took that, then the bad's going to come also. There's nothing in the world, absolutely nothing, which is all good or all bad. Everything is a mixture of both. And if you take one, you're going to get the other. So you think, okay, the things that are obviously bad to me, I'll surrender that to God. And the good things I might as well keep because I worked hard for them. But no, there in the good things that you think that you're keeping is mixed in bad without your seeing it. And that will come and will cause you pain. And so prapatti is the path of recognizing that I can't do all of the things that are required of me. I don't know how to do them. I don't have the time to study them and to learn all of these things. I don't have the circumstances which are ideal for spiritual life. But what I have is the desire to find God. And so let me surrender everything to you. Not surrender everything to him or to her. No, I surrender everything to you. Everything that I have, I give to you. So let me end by quoting a prayer of St. Teresa, just to bring a larger interreligious note to the ending. This is called her Bookmark Prayer, because after she died in 1582 in Spain, This was found in her, that she had kept as a bookmark, that she had written. It's her own prayer that she had written, and she kept it with her always as a reminder. And so it was what she wanted to remind herself of always. So she says, let nothing disturb you. Don't let anything disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. So don't let anything disturb you, don't let anything frighten you, because everything is passing. There's a wonderful pop psychology principle, which is called the 100-year rule. When you find yourself obsessing over something, worrying about something, thinking that something is such a big problem, then think, 100 years from now, is anyone going to care? Is anyone going to remember? No. They're not going to care. So why should I care so much now? Why should I care so much now? So let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God only is changeless. God is the only one we can really depend on. Everything else and everyone else is passing. God is the only thing we can depend on. Patience gains all things. As Holy Mother used to say, and Sri Ramakrishna also, Saw. Endure, endure, endure. He who endures wins, as Holy Mother said. Who has God wants nothing. God alone suffices. So knowing that God alone suffices, nothing else will ever fulfill the longing of the heart. Nothing. Yes, we can't get rid of longing just by saying that, well, I know nothing is going to fulfill me but God. The longing is still there. It still comes up. But let it come up. You can't suppress it. You can't deny it. It's still there. But behind it, have that firm conviction that, yes, this is arising. It's going to push me around. I know that. But I also know that nothing is going to suffice until I find God. That God alone suffices. That this is something rooted deep in the mind. I haven't gotten to the root of it yet. It still comes up. Let it come. Let it do what it does. I can't suppress it. Let it do what it does. But behind it, I know that there is something higher. And someday that is going to solve all of my problems. Nothing else, nothing else, nothing else. So I'll just read it one last time and then give a closing prayer. Let nothing, and read it straight through without commentary. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God only is changeless. Patience gains all things. Who has God wants nothing. God alone suffices. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. That infinite reality is full, perfect, and complete. This relative universe is full, perfect, and complete. From out of the fullness of that infinite being, the fullness of this universe has come. And yet that being remains ever the same. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So now let me give announcements before the Arati.